Four men stormed into Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, La Renaissance. Dressed in maintenance uniforms, they locked the doors and pulled out weapons. "Quiet! Phones on the table," one barked, his voice cutting through the room. At a corner table sat Victoria Ashford, CEO of Ashford Industries and one of the wealthiest women in America. She barely had time to react before she felt the cold press of a gun barrel against her back. "You're going to transfer $50 million right now," the scar-faced leader hissed, "or your rich friends here start dropping." At the next table, a boy no older than 15 calmly ate his burger. He wore a simple school uniform, his old backpack resting by his feet. While panic spread through the room, he seemed almost untouched by it. "Hey, kid!" one of the gunmen shouted, pointing at his phone. "You deaf?" The boy, Daniel Reeves, slowly looked up. His face showed no fear, only calm, almost unsettling focus. "I heard you," he said evenly, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "I was finishing my food. My father always said wasting food disrespects those who have nothing." The mention of his father stirred something inside him. Just 3 months earlier, General Marcus Reeves had died under suspicious circumstances. Officials claimed it was a heart attack, but Daniel knew his father had been silenced for exposing high-level corruption. His father's voice still echoed in his mind. "Observe everything, the exits, the threats, the weak points." As chaos erupted, Daniel's sharp eyes scanned the room, quietly mapping it out. The leader sneered. "Smart mouth. Let's see how funny you are after." "Sir," Daniel cut in calmly, "you have about 4 minutes and 37 seconds before the police arrive. The silent alarm triggered when you broke that door." The robber froze. "How the hell would you know that?" "Observation," Daniel replied. "The manager tapped his watch 3 times when you came in. Standard panic signal. I've read those security manuals. My father used to bring them home." For a moment, silence. Then the leader laughed harshly. "A genius, huh? A kid from the suburbs who thinks he's clever." He turned his weapon back toward Victoria. "Transfer the money, or he's the first to go." Victoria's hand shook as she picked up her phone. Then her eyes met Daniel's. In one quick glance, he signaled, first at the chandelier above the leader, then at the fire extinguisher on the wall, and back at her. She understood. After all, she had built an empire by reading people, and this boy wasn't acting like a victim. He was something else entirely. "I'll need my digital reader to authorize the transfer," Victoria said, her voice suddenly steadier. "It's in my bag." "Slow," the leader warned, stepping back. That was the opening Daniel needed. In one fluid motion, he kicked the table leg, sending a plate crashing into the leader's face. Hot sauce splattered, blinding him. Without hesitation, Daniel grabbed a chair and hurled it at the chandelier overhead. Glass shattered and fell like rain. Glass rained down on the robbers, throwing the room into chaos. "Back door now," Daniel shouted to Victoria. She didn't hesitate. The 3 remaining gunmen scrambled to respond, but with diners running in panic, their weapons were useless. One fired into the ceiling, desperate to regain control. Daniel was already moving. He yanked the fire extinguisher from the wall and blasted foam into the shooter's face. The man coughed, blinded and stumbling backward. "Damn kid!" another roared, charging at him. But Daniel wasn't just some teenager fighting for his life. His blocks and counters were sharp, deliberate, every strike aimed at weak points his father had drilled into him for years. Within seconds, the burly attacker was down, clutching an arm bent at a painful angle. Daniel stepped back, calm and steady. "You picked the wrong restaurant," he said evenly. "And you picked the wrong person to threaten in front of me." The leader, still wiping sauce from his face, finally looked at Daniel properly. His military posture. His precise strikes. His total lack of hesitation. This wasn't luck, it was training. Who are you?" the man stammered. Daniel didn't answer. He only glanced toward the entrance where sirens wailed outside. 4 minutes and 40 seconds. His timing had been almost perfect. Victoria, standing safely by the kitchen, couldn't believe her eyes. The boy she had assumed was just an ordinary student had just dismantled a robbery with the composure of a soldier. 3 minutes, Daniel announced, as if reading from an invisible watch. I suggest you put down your weapons before my colleagues arrive." "Colleagues?" the leader scoffed, though his voice now shook with doubt. Daniel gave a small, knowing smile. "My father was General Marcus Reeves, commander of the 5th Special Operations Division. He may be gone, but his men still protect his family, and they don't take kindly to threats against the general's son." The words hit like a hammer. At that exact moment, the kitchen door swung open. 3 men walked in, not police, but broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed professionals in plain clothes. Their stance alone gave them away. Soldiers. They didn't need introductions. They moved into position, surrounding the gunman with silent precision. "Drop your weapons. Hands on your heads," ordered the eldest of the 3, his voice carrying absolute authority. The robbers froze, pale-faced. They knew the look of military training, and they knew they were finished. Slowly, they obeyed. Daniel, unbothered, returned to his table and slung his backpack over his shoulder. As he did, Victoria caught a glimpse inside: military files, surveillance photos, a notebook labeled Operation Cleanup. This boy hadn't been here by chance. "Sorry to disturb your dinner, Ms. Ashford," Daniel said politely, as if the chaos around them hadn't happened. "I hope we can talk once the police are done here. I have some questions about your ties to DEFCON Industries." The name made Victoria's blood run cold. DEFCON, the same defense contractor with deep government contracts. The same company General Reeves had been investigating before his death. Daniel headed for the exit, then paused, turning back with one final warning. "Oh, and Ms. Ashford, don't try to run. We have people watching every exit in this city. My father taught me well. Always have a plan B, C, and D." As the robbers were cuffed and led out, Victoria finally saw the bigger picture. They hadn't been the real threat at all, they were just pawns. The true strategist in that restaurant was the 15-year-old boy. And one chilling thought echoed in her mind. If Daniel Reeves is only 15 and already this dangerous, what exactly was his father preparing him to become? If you're wondering how Daniel managed to turn the tables so quickly, don't forget to subscribe. Because the truth about who Daniel Reeves really is, and what he's planning, goes far beyond a simple rescue. This was only the beginning. 3 hours later, at the police station, Victoria Ashford finished giving her statement, her hands still trembling slightly as she signed the final page. Detective Reynolds closed the folder with a nod. "Ms. Ashford, you were incredibly lucky that boy was there. 15 years old, and he handled himself like a trained operative." Victoria forced a polite smile, but inside her thoughts were racing. Luck had nothing to do with Daniel Reeves. He was deliberate, controlled, and far more dangerous than anyone realized. Outside the station, her private attorney James Peterson was waiting by the limousine. "I want everything on this boy," she ordered as she slid into the back seat. "Family, school, medical records, down to the brand of toothpaste he uses." James handed her a tablet. "I've already started. His father, General Marcus Reeves, died 3 months ago. Officially, a heart attack. But before that, the general worked as the Pentagon's internal audit director, investigating irregular military contracts. His last inquiry, DEFCON Industries." Victoria's face went pale. "Oh my God! DEFCON Industries, one of the nation's biggest military tech suppliers." What almost no one knew was that, through hidden shell companies, she was its largest private shareholder. "The boy mentioned DEFCON," she whispered. "He knows." James adjusted his glasses nervously. If the general uncovered the overpriced contracts, the secret weapons tests, the bribes to senators. "Not a word more," Victoria snapped, glancing at the driver. But it was already too late. Her phone vibrated. A text, from an unknown number. "Hello, Ms. Ashford. Thank you for not mentioning our agreement to the police. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Coffee Corner on 5th Avenue. We need to talk about the future of DEFCON." D. Victoria's stomach turned. How did this boy have her private number? She typed back quickly. "I don't know who you think you are, but I am not intimidated by children." The reply came instantly. "Neither was my father. But 72 hours after he confronted you about the $840 million stolen through phantom maintenance contracts, he was dead." Coincidences are fascinating, don't you think? Victoria's hands shook as she deleted the message. How could he know the exact number? Those files were buried in secure, supposedly unbreakable systems. It's just blackmail, she muttered to herself. A traumatized boy lashing out after his father's death. But even as she spoke the words, her mind was already racing, calculating the potential fallout. If Daniel truly had evidence, and from the look of things, he did, one leak would be enough to destroy everything. Not just DEFCON, but Victoria's entire fortune. 30 years of empire building could collapse overnight. The next day, 2:45 p.m. Victoria sat inside Coffee Corner, hiding behind oversized sunglasses and a scarf. The disguise was laughable, any paparazzi could see through it, but the press wasn't her concern today. At exactly 3 o'clock, Daniel walked in. Backpack slung over his shoulder, wrinkled school uniform, worn-out sneakers. On the surface, he looked like any teenager from the suburbs. But his eyes, cold, calculating. The same kind of eyes Victoria had only seen across boardroom tables during hostile takeovers. He sat without asking, ordered a hot chocolate, and began speaking as if this were nothing more than small talk. "You know," Daniel said casually, stirring with a straw, "my dad used to take me fishing every Sunday. He told me patience is a strategist's greatest weapon. Wait for the fish to bite, son. Don't force it. Let him think he's in control." Victoria stayed silent, her jaw tight. "He spent 3 years investigating you," Daniel went on smoothly. "Created 47 false identities. Followed transfers through 12 different tax havens. Recorded 89 hours of conversations that could ruin you." "I don't know what you're talking about," Victoria replied, but her voice cracked. Daniel smiled, not a boy's smile, but something sharper. "Of course you do. That's why you had him silenced. You have no proof." Daniel leaned forward, voice calm. "A private autopsy found digitalis in his blood. Causes a sudden heart attack. Almost impossible to detect, unless you know what to look for." He slid a thin folder across the table. "This is just a copy. The originals are secured in 17 different locations." Victoria opened it with trembling hands. Inside were toxicology reports, medical notes, even photos from the autopsy. Her pulse spiked. Everything she had built suddenly felt like it was about to collapse. "What do you want?" she whispered. "Justice," Daniel said simply. "My father served this country for 30 years. He died because you were making billions from defective weapons, profiting off the deaths of soldiers." Victoria drew in a sharp breath, then straightened her back. "I could destroy you. You're a minor. Evidence like this would never hold up in court. And I have lawyers who could bury you for years." "You're right," Daniel cut in, calm as ever. "Court would be complicated. That's why I'm not going to court." From his backpack, he pulled out a laptop. On the screen was the homepage of a popular investigative blog, millions of readers, known for exposing corruption. The site was run by Kenneth Morrison, a Pulitzer-winning journalist, and a former Marine who had once served under Daniel's father. Daniel turned the laptop around. "One call from me, and tomorrow morning 12 million people will wake up to the headline, 'The billionaire who killed a general.'" Victoria's stomach dropped. For the first time in years, she felt the ground give way beneath her feet. "You can't prove I gave the order." Daniel leaned back. "I don't need to prove it in court. I just need to raise enough doubt. You know what happens then: media firestorm, federal probe, nervous investors, stock prices tanking overnight." He shut the laptop with finality. The empire she built on war profits could collapse within 3 days. Silence stretched. Victoria felt the weight of it, realizing with shock that she was trapped by a boy barely old enough to drive. All her money, her contacts, her power, worthless against someone who had nothing left to lose. Daniel's tone shifted, calm and almost like a teacher. "Here's how this is going to play out. You'll transfer 51% of DEFCON shares to a veterans trust, men and women who served under my father. Then you'll resign from the board. Publicly. Say it's over ethical disagreements." Victoria's voice cracked. "That's extortion." "No," Daniel replied firmly. "That's justice." He pushed $5 across the table for his hot chocolate and stood. You have 48 hours. Otherwise, the world will learn the truth, that Victoria Ashford made billions while soldiers died using gear she knew was faulty. He turned to leave. Desperate, Victoria called after him. How did a 15-year-old pull this off? Daniel paused. His face carried both grief and steel. My father trained me from the time I was 6, strategy, forensic analysis, programming, encryption. He knew he was fighting dangerous people. He made sure I'd survive the day he couldn't protect me. A tear slid down his cheek, the first sign of raw emotion Victoria had seen. You didn't just kill my father, Ms. Ashford. You created the weapon that would destroy you. He walked out, leaving her alone with decades of corruption finally catching up to her. Watching him vanish into the crowd, a terrifying thought echoed in her mind. If he could do this at 15, what else was he capable of? Victoria wasn't known for sitting still. Within 2 hours, she had mobilized her best assets, a former FBI agent turned private investigator, 3 top lawyers skilled at burying scandals, and a hacker tasked with locating and erasing Daniel's files. On the phone with her head of security, she dismissed the boy. He's 15. No real connections, no serious resources. Find the evidence and wipe it clean, quietly. But she didn't realize every move was being watched. In a small Brooklyn apartment, Daniel sat in front of 3 glowing monitors. At his side was Captain James Rodriguez, a veteran who had served under his father for 20 years. James pointed to one of the screens. She just brought in secure trace investigations, Rodriguez said, his hands moving quickly over the keyboard. Same firm that handled your father's case, and just happened to declare it an accident. Daniel didn't react outwardly, only wrote a few lines in a notebook already crammed with evidence. Since his father's death 3 months earlier, he had never been alone. 17 veterans, men who owed their lives to General Reeves, had stepped in as his shield, his mentors, and his family. She'll try intimidation first, Daniel murmured, scanning data. And if that fails, she'll go for elimination. That's her pattern. Rodriguez opened another file. We tracked down her accountant, Thomas Chun, the one who moved her bribe money. He's in Seattle, and he's willing to testify if granted immunity. A faint smile appeared on Daniel's face. My father always said, arrogant generals fall because they think they're fighting a lone enemy. The next morning, Victoria found an envelope waiting on her desk. Inside was a photo, her leaving her personal lawyer's building less than an hour earlier. On the back, written in graceful handwriting, Ms. Ashford, every move is watched. Every call is heard. Give up while you still have a choice. Her fingers crushed the paper, but her hands trembled. How had he known exactly where she'd be? Just then, her investigator, Mitchell Barnes, called. Ms. Ashford, I've uncovered something about the boy. Go on. He's not alone. We've identified at least 12 military veterans protecting him. All former special forces. One of them, James Rodriguez, specialized in cyber warfare on classified missions. Victoria's breath caught. 12. And those are just the confirmed ones, Barnes added carefully. We suspect the network is bigger. This isn't a traumatized teenager. This is a coordinated military operation. General Reeves trained him for this. Victoria ended the call abruptly, her mind racing. Physical threats were off the table. Going after Daniel directly would be suicide. There was only one weapon left: destroy his reputation. She launched her PR machine. I want a full campaign, blogs, social media, everywhere. Paint him as unstable, obsessed with conspiracies, dangerous if possible. But Daniel had anticipated it. By the time the first smear posts appeared online, he released his counterstrike, a simple video. Sitting in a plain room, wearing his school uniform, he looked like any other teenager. His voice was steady. My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm 15. My father, General Marcus Reeves, died 3 months ago while uncovering corruption in military contracts. In the days ahead, you'll hear they think I'm unstable, dangerous, obsessed. But desperate people say desperate things. And the truth always comes out. The video spread like wildfire. Within 6 hours, it had over 2 million views. The story of a young black teenager taking on a billionaire gripped the public. Every attempt to smear him only made his support stronger. Victoria was furious. "How is he pulling this off?" she shouted at her PR team. The answer arrived in another envelope. Inside was a flash drive and a single note. 48 hours just became 24. Transfer or exposure. Your choice. Victoria slid the flash drive into her laptop with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. 30 seconds played. Snippets of her voice negotiating payoffs with senators, emails ordering faulty equipment out to field units, and a photo of her with a man known in intelligence circles as the Fixer. The photo was dated 2 days before General Reeves died. She retched in her office, a private moment of physical shock in a $200 million suite. Daniel hadn't been bluffing. He never had been. The truth hit her harder than any threat. She wasn't bargaining with a hurt kid. She was up against a carefully planned campaign, the last project of a dead general, carried out by trained veterans and executed like an operation. This wasn't Daniel working alone. It was the effort of 18 former soldiers, 3 years of quiet digging, and a step-by-step plan that had just reached its peak. Victoria finally understood. She hadn't merely silenced a whistleblower. She had killed a general. Generals don't leave nothing behind. Less than a day after the deadline, Victoria sat across from Daniel in a neutral law office, hands shaking as she signed the transfer papers that handed 51% of DEFCON to a veterans trust. "This is extortion," she kept repeating, voice breaking. "This is restitution," Daniel answered, calm and steady. Kenneth Morrison, the investigative journalist, watched from the table beside him, eyes alert. Victoria scrawled the final line and pushed the pen away. "Done. You win. Now give me whatever you want," she said. Daniel's smile wasn't childish. It was the quiet grin of someone who had just finished a long plan. "We never wanted to silence you," he said. "We wanted the right audience to hear it." He nodded at Morrison, who opened his laptop. On screen, a finished article, headline ready. "You said you'd expose me if I transferred the shares," Victoria hissed. "You gave me 24 hours, not." "You had 48, Daniel cut in, voice cold. "You had 24 because you chose to try and destroy us first. Smear campaigns, hired PIs, hacks, we recorded it all." Rodriguez stepped into the room with a thick folder and laid out photo after photo. Victoria meeting in a cafe, passing an envelope, receiving a disposable phone. The evidence was precise: directional mics, parabolic audio captures, GPS logs. Military tradecraft, used against her. "And there's more," Daniel said. "You weren't only going to silence me. You planned to kill Kenneth." Morrison's face didn't change. "Too bad I work with others. If anything happens to me, 3 colleagues release everything immediately." Victoria crumpled. "What do you want?" "Money. Everything I own. My ruin." Daniel's answer was simple and surgical. "Tomorrow, 6 a.m., the article goes live. 7 a.m., the FBI receives every file, the emails, the autopsy, the bank trails. 8 a.m., every senator who took payments gets a copy of the records." He closed his notebook. The timetable was final. Victoria sat stunned as the room turned quiet except for the hum of the AC. The empire she'd spent decades building was about to be ripped open, and there was nothing left for her to do but watch the first domino fall. Daniel let the silence hang before he spoke again. "At 9 a.m., when the markets open, Ashford Industries stock will crash. Your investors will scatter. Your allies will deny ever knowing you. And you'll feel what my father felt, watching everything he built collapse while powerless to stop it. He spent 3 years gathering evidence, all while soldiers died using equipment you knowingly allowed. How many families shattered? How many widows and orphans left behind?" He stepped closer until he was face to face with her. "You killed my father for discovering the truth. You made me an orphan at 15, and you thought you could go on living your billionaire life without consequences." Victoria broke down, sobbing. "Please, I have a family." "And my father had a son," Daniel cut in, his voice flat. "The difference is, your family will live on. Just poor, disgraced, and visiting you in prison." Morrison shut the laptop. "It's time." Daniel walked toward the door, then stopped. "There's a lesson here, Ms. Ashford. Real power doesn't come from money or connections. It comes from integrity, strategy, and loyal allies. You had billions, but you stood alone. I had only the memory of an honorable father, and people willing to fight beside me. That's why you lost." He left her there, broken, as her empire crumbled. The next morning, headlines erupted across every major outlet. Victoria Ashford's downfall was as dramatic as her rise. And at the center of it all was a 15-year-old boy who turned grief into justice and revenge into a legacy. 6 months later, Daniel Reeves turned 16. He was no longer the invisible orphan. He now led the General Reeves Fund, a billion-dollar foundation investigating military corruption and supporting veterans' families. The shares he forced from DEFCON were reinvested to ensure soldiers received safe, reliable equipment. Meanwhile, Victoria Ashford sat in federal prison, sentenced to 25 years for murder, corruption, and attempted murder. Kenneth Morrison won another Pulitzer Prize for his reporting, which revealed not just Victoria's crimes but a vast network of fraud that spanned 3 decades. Every week, Daniel visited his father's grave. Laying fresh flowers, he whispered, "We did it, Dad. Justice, not just for you, but for every soldier who was betrayed." The lesson was undeniable. True power is not measured in wealth or status. It's built on honor, strategy, and loyalty. Victoria had billions, but she had no one when she fell. Daniel had only his father's memory, and he turned it into a force for justice. The greatest revenge was not destroying the enemy, but creating a legacy that transformed tragedy into hope for thousands. If this story of courage and justice moved you, subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes, even a 15-year-old, with the right training, can bring down empires built on lies and blood.